Well, welcome. Let's get us started. Good evening. This is Friday, May 15th. This is the regular third Friday meeting of WILF San Jose branch. We're happy you're here. Nice to see everybody. Tonight's speaker is special. We have Sharat Lin, who's an activist in the San Jose area, well, in the whole Bay Area. We can't limit it to San Jose. He's active in the whole Bay Area, and we're really looking forward to that. These are songs that we chose that relate to the experience that, as we see it, of Sharat. Now, this is really quite a theme song because I see Sharat as not ever giving up, no matter what. Everybody mute. You know how this goes. And then sing along to your heart's content. You don't have to be on tune, on time, or know the words. You just sing with the raging grannies. Here we go. We're not giving up. We are not ever giving up. We know we're in this struggle for the long haul. We're not giving up. Shoulder to shoulder, we're not giving up. Although we're growing older, we're not giving up. We know we're in this struggle for the long haul. We're not giving up. We ain't sitting crying. We're not giving up. The left is not dying. We're not giving up. We know we're in this struggle for the long haul. We're not giving up. We are not ever giving up. We are not ever giving up. We know we're in this struggle for the long haul. We're not giving up. We're up against the system. We're not giving up. We still resist them. We're not giving up. We know we're in this struggle for the long haul. We're not giving up. We're not giving up. We are not ever giving up. We know we're in this struggle for the long haul. We're not giving up.
We're the raging grannies, and it's turning our hair gray to think that men in suits are taking all our rights away. We fought this fight before, and now we fight again today. Not one step back, no way. They want to take us back in time when bigots ruled the land, when women, blacks, and poor folks from the voting booths were banned. But this is our democracy, and this is our demand. Not one step back, no way. No more residents arrested. For 50 years now we've protested to realize the dream and gain democracy for all. Not one step back, no way. Do they think that we don't know just what their scheming laws have done? How redistricting is how they got the votes they say they won. Now they're passing voting laws that make it hard for everyone. Not one step back, no way. We voted all our lives. There's not a struggle we have missed, but they want to just ignore us and pretend we don't exist. Once again, our rights are threatened, and we're seriously pissed. Not one step back, no way. No more residents arrested. For 50 years now we've protested to realize the dream and gain democracy for all. Not one step back, no way. We've got to get together, young and old and black and white, the unemployed and union folks, and work with all our might to realize the dream and fight to keep our hard-earned rights. Not one step back, no way. No more residents arrested. For 50 years now we've protested to realize the dream and gain democracy for all. Not one step back, no way.
Tonight's speak comes to us and is not unfamiliar. Sharat Lin, as long as I can remember, has been the face of the San Jose Peace and Justice Center. At every event that is a big community event, Sharat's there, managing chairs, managing microphones, managing the technology, keeping the bathrooms open, and doing all the other things. And then he dances at the end to remind us there is joy in life. All of that while being a dedicated peace activist, highly educated, active in the anti-nuclear movement, as well as many other movements, and taking the leadership for various peace events in the San Jose area. The latest one that I attended was at the Martin Luther King Jr. event in January. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight and welcome as our speaker, Sharat Lin with Activism.
Well, thank you very much, Paula, and thank you all for for being here. And I'm just delighted to. It's been a long time since I've had the opportunity to address the San Jose WILPF chapter, and I remember the days when you folks would come and meet in person. Anyway, a lot has happened in that period of time. And I actually have not prepared any formal presentation here, but I will just go with the flow here. And then, if you want to interact, if any of you want to interject something or ask a question, please feel free to do so. Let's keep this discussion informal. First, I would say that the art is not just there for joy. I mean, I've done. I guess one thing I can say is that I've been blessed to be able to contribute in different ways, in different arts. You know, both visual as well as performing arts, and so there are many different ways that we can do this. But the arts are not just there for the joy, to break the sort of the drudgery of activism, and although it does have its joys. There are times when we do win significant victories, and we have to celebrate. We have to recognize those victories, and but most of them happen because of mass effort, because of a lot of people get involved, a lot of people mobilize, and work at these issues with perseverance. So it's about that not giving up, right? Because political change, social change, does not happen overnight. But the other role of the arts is in actually helping to catalyze the movement, right? Because arts give people something to look forward to, something to inspire them. So the art, and by that I mean my involvement in it has been with the collection, The Art of Protest, which is today has grown into a collection of we have. I was looking at the roster of the posters that have now been collected, and there are now 190 silkscreen posters in the collection, and about 150 of them are framed. And so that is, in contrast to the original 26 that comprised the collection that I collected mostly during the resistance to the Vietnam War, and so it's a big collection now that really is suitable to bring into a major museum or art gallery. And so that's one of the things that I will be working on, because a lot of people who are not involved have never seen this kind of artwork before, and it'd be good to expose them to it. I did some exhibits, well, various exhibits at some of the libraries, and the librarians there told me that these were very useful to start some discussions. And yeah, there was a few people who were unhappy at some of the posters, but by and large, the librarian said it was a good thing because it stimulated discussion, it stimulated thought, and that's really what we need is for people to think about their situation and what they can do about it. And just to remind you, so this is one of the posters now, framed in the art of protest, and it is sad, of course, as you say, that a lot of these issues, I mean, such as this one, which is about abortion, is here we are 50 years later, and we're still struggling with some of these same issues. In fact, there are people in this country who still want to take us backwards. So we can't give up. Of course, we can't give up. But that's where we are right now. The dance is also about with inspiring music, is inspiring people to carry on and to not give up the fight. So the arts are really essential in that we will never give up sort of philosophy. So maybe I will. What I will do is touch upon a few things that I have been doing very recently, and it goes beyond peace. Of course, it's also about social justice, and but I'll just say a few things that I've done recently because those are my memory of them is fresh, and they have also taken me well beyond the Bay Area. So one of the things that I did was, I want to say one thing. I want to recognize one thing. Today is May 15th, and most of you probably know that May 15th is the day that the Palestinians consider to be Yom Nakba, which is the day of the catastrophe. And of course, the catastrophe didn't happen on one day, but it was the day when the state of Israel was declared, and so that day marks the event that took place over a period of 1.5 years, from 1947 to early 1949, which was the expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians from 531 villages. That is the what we call a Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe. And I'm wearing here this pendant, which is it's I looked it up, and if you Google it, it will come up as the Tree of Life, and then it dawned on me that the Tree of Life is actually the olive tree, and the olive tree is for Palestinians the Tree of Life. It is the tree of resilience, because these trees have, some of them were planted centuries ago. In fact, there are olive trees that are still alive today that existed at the time of Jesus, when Jesus was alive. So It's they truly are the trees of resilience, and therefore a good symbol of Palestinian resilience. Anyway, I did have a chance to visit. I was visiting my granddaughter, who was born on January 1st near Boston, and I ran into some Palestine vigils in Boston. Had some good conversations there. It was just good to see, people carrying on the struggle everywhere we go. And I ran into a lot more in Italy back in November. I was in Milano, and there were nightly vigils for Palestine in the plaza of the Duomo. The Duomo is really huge and beautiful cathedral at the center of old Milano. So it's the struggle is happening worldwide. But in recent months, I was in addition to Boston, I was at Alamogordo, New Mexico, for the protest, a week-long protest against the one of the major U.S. drone bases where they trained the drone operators and performed dance of peace both in the protests as well as in some programs in the parks. And we would get up, early in the morning because there's the morning commute. So the people who work in the base will number about 5,000 or 6,000. It's really stunning if you think that 5,000 or 6,000 people, drive, each one driving driving solo in their cars, entering the space every morning, starting at maybe 6 in the morning, and the commute continues till about 8:30. Just a continuous stream of cars, and so we're there, displaying them banners about, refuse to fly those drones, leave your jobs. What you're doing is not helpful to our security and our peace and our well-being. And then we do that again starting at I think it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon for the commute going home. And so that was what we did for 5 days. And but it's a great event. In a way, it's also a retreat. I get away from the things that I normally do day to day. Get to be in a different place. Get to be with a different group of people whom I haven't met for a few years, and we get to share that experience, that camaraderie, and connect with activists from all over the country. And then I went to Los Angeles because I had a number of family visits to make, and I landed there on the day that it turned out was the commemorations of the Armenian genocide, which started in 1915, and the Armenian community is not shy to call this a genocide. And of course, the difference is, the difference between the Armenians and the Palestinians is that the Palestinians have organized opposition. There is a very, very powerful well-funded opposition that wants to deny the Palestinian genocide. And there isn't that kind of opposition to the Armenian genocide. The Turkish community is small, and also the Turkish community here does not want to deny it. I think only the Turkish government does. But then there's the other actor, which is Azerbaijan, which is the other Turkish state, which has just a few years ago, forced Armenians out of an enclave, which they call Nagorno-Karabakh, which the Armenians call Artsakh. They were forced out of that. So 120,000 people have been displaced into Armenia. And so that their genocide is also ongoing, at least in spurts. And but at least they can talk about it. They can commemorate it in huge events that are supported by elected officials, because those elected officials, can say without fear the truth that there was a genocide, and we must never let it happen again. And so this is the challenge for Palestinians, and I think that the events since October 7th have been tragic. They have been devastating, and they have, of course, led to the current war that the U.S. is imposing on Iran. And but at the same time, there is a turning point in American public opinion, and so we can turn this around. That what is needed is to change Congress and to change our elected officials, because they are living in the past and with a different reality. So I think that we have an opportunity to make this transition to being able to commemorate the Palestinian genocide with these with what's going on now. So that's what I have done recently, and there is a big struggle that is coming up, and here's one. It's good to talk about struggles where there's a lot of unity. I like those because I think we have a good chance of winning. And the one where there's a lot of unity is on ICE, and you may know that it has been revealed just a couple of days ago that it looks like, I mean, the details are still to be confirmed, but that ICE is moving to establish a detention center, or a prison, we can call it. It is a prison in Santa Clara County, and just outside of Gilroy. It's just just a short distance away from the, where you turn off from Freeway 101. You turn off from 152 going east to the Central Valley. It's right there, and there's evidence that they are through subcontractors, converting that farm into an ICE detention center. So there was a press conference was it yesterday, where the county leaders, city leaders, I mean, everybody was united. There were 200 people there at the press conference. It was unbelievable. So I would say that this is an issue where we can stand shoulder to shoulder, because nearly everyone is opposed to this, and it's going to be an issue which is also an opportunity to build unity, to build political awareness and build unity, and maybe that unity will spill over into other issues, such as stopping this insane war in Iran and the insane arms shipments to Israel and other countries, and the insanity about supporting NATO, an institution which is obsolete. So those are some of the opportunities. So now now that I've talked a little bit about the present, what is sort of on my mind at the moment, I'm going to go back to the past and recount a little bit about how I became an activist. Of course, I became an activist, not just an activist, but also a writer and an intellectual. And actually, those were some of my early contributions. I mean, as an activist, I mean, I didn't start as a leader. I started as a follower. I started as someone who just simply participated in the protest. The first protest that I was involved in were the student strikes of 1968. And I mean, it was an amazing time because the student strike mobilizations were massive, and they involved enormous commitments of student time, and there were these mass meetings. I was at UC Santa Cruz, and the organizing meetings. Well, so what they needed was a large space that could accommodate hundreds of students, where we could meet, we could receive news from other campuses. And remember, this is before the internet, so if there was a strike action at UC Berkeley or Sonoma State, we had to we would invite someone who was visiting from one of those campuses, or someone who had from our campus who had visited those campuses, to come and give a report back, because there was no social media, and it all came because of eyewitness observers coming and telling us, and then the organizing that had to go on, and this would take hours. So every day we needed a place that would be available for many hours, and so the best place, and this constrained the location and the time. The biggest place that's available indoors is a dining hall, and the longest period of time that it's available is from after dinner to before breakfast. So these meetings would take place starting at maybe 9:30, maybe 10 p.m., and they would run until 3 a.m. And I had seen so many of them where I didn't stay until the end, but maybe 2 a.m. there still would be 200 people in the dining hall, and so the energy was very high, but that's how I became involved. We were involved in some pickets of the academic buildings, pickets of the entrances to the building, and then that's also where I found some of the first posters. Then I went to UC Berkeley, and there were a lot more, because there was a poster making workshop in the School of Architecture in May of 1970. And I was there that summer, so I was just there at the right time to pick up so many of the posters from that workshop that formed the nucleus of the art of protest. And so that's how I got started. I mean, and if you ask me, was it because of the influence of other people? Was it because my parents were activists? No, they weren't. In fact, my parents were not activists. And so I would say that I grew up in a set of circumstances that were where there was a tremendous sense of urgency. There was a mass mobilization, so that helped. But the other thing that I think motivates people, and I think that we have to, give more credit to this, is that when something happens in the world, whether it's local or far away, and there's enough news coverage, or we have access to that news coverage, if the cognitive dissonance is great enough, in other words, we see something which is the news reporting, and we see a policy that is totally inconsistent with the evidence that we are seeing on that news coverage. And this includes the mainstream news coverage. I tell people, and a lot of people tell me that, oh, the New York Times is full of lies. The mainstream media are full of lies. I disagree with them because the mainstream media in this country give people the wrong impression because of the news that they decide not to print or not to broadcast. So it's what they leave out that leads to extreme bias. If your reporting is based upon reporters who are embedded in the U.S. Army as they were in Vietnam, or is based upon the statements of the White House press secretary, right? And you don't have corresponding reports of the statements by the Iranian spokesperson, okay, or the Palestinian spokesperson. You're just not going to get the whole picture, and that's what's missing. Is not that there are lies. I mean, there are lies coming out of the White House, right, or out of the State Department. But the news reports what it receives. So the news is not responsible for creating lies, but it is showing the commentary from only one side, and so it's what is left out that is the problem. And when you go to other media, you go to the BBC, you go to Al Jazeera, you go to Deutsche Welle, and you get interviews from maybe not as much as we would need, but you get some interviewing of people of other countries, so you get other perspectives other than the U.S. And in the U.S., it's mostly the security perspective, right? It's when we're talking about international affairs, it's the U.S. national security advisors, the State Department, the Department of War, as they call it now. So it's in that sense, it's not a balanced reporting, and gives us a very a false narrative as a whole, right? And so that is also the motivation for me, because when you have this cognitive dissonance, that here are the facts as best I know it, and the policy is so different from the facts, then that says that is a contradiction that I cannot. I can't sit still and just accept that contradiction. And I think that's what young people are seeing today. The reason that so many young people are mobilizing against these wars that the U.S. is engaged in, and some of them are attacks, like the attack on Venezuela, and attacks on Cuba in terms of sanctions, in terms of denying, it's really interdiction, piracy of oil tankers on the high seas, is because young people today see these contradictions, and they are aware of international law, and they see the contradictions with what the U.S. is saying about piracy by other countries. That if people from Somalia hijack a ship on the high seas, it's piracy. But if the U.S. hijacks an oil tanker in the Caribbean, it's not. I mean, and of course, it doesn't make any sense that way. So people are see the contradiction, and they feel they have to act. So that is sort of how I got started, and some of the things that were very influential to me in terms of reading the one book. If I had to pick one book that made a deep impression on me, it was Malcolm X's autobiography, and hands down that book changed me. And then after that, I mean, I was in 1975. There was the declaration of emergency in India, and so I was one of the primary leaders of that activism, the protests against the state of emergency in India from 1975 to 1977. And so that is where I think I got my first experience at leading, at organizing and leading the protests. And then I had to go on to other things, but one thing was that the key area of my focus is that as someone who wants to educate, and I believe very strongly that we have to base our actions on facts and evidence, and very careful analysis of history, looking at the root causes, the real root causes of conflict, and that's why I started writing. So I was this was about 1979, and I was within 3 months of finishing my PhD thesis at UC Berkeley in the medical field, and I set that thesis down for 3 months. I said I have another paper that I want to write on political economy, because there was a huge debate that was going on in prominent journals in India on what is known as the mode of production. In other words, was the Indian economy a feudal economy, or was it a capitalist economy? Was it in transition, or was it something else? So that was the great debate, and it's a little bit hard to identify with from an American perspective, because the U.S. Sort of after Britain sort of led the way into capitalist development, and but the evolution of India was different, because it evolved under 200 years of British colonialism, and so its economy was stunted by that colonialism, and the feudalism in that system was preserved by British colonialism, because the British ruled through the feudal landlords, and so the transformation of India that was slow at the beginning after independence, 1947. It took some time. It took until about 1980 before it could really throw off the shackles of the effects of colonialism and start a process of internal development of capitalism. Even though, I mean, it had dependent capital, but it is about, this autonomous development of capitalism. But anyway, there was a big debate, and so I wrote a very long article that was published in two parts, and then I finished that in 3 months, and then I went back to my thesis, finished the thesis and worked on that for 3 months, got my degree, and then I went off. And I didn't do. There was a period when I didn't do much activism. I was too busy with working and then later on raising a family. And although I did spend some time going back to India, I spent a total of 6 years, much of that as an activist in India, although also as a medical researcher, and did a number of projects, really quite diverse, ranging from the cooperative sugarcane industry to migrant labor. Well, actually, both of these projects involved migrant labor. So in the sugarcane industry, you have the sugarcane cutters who come from poorer regions, poor villages. They migrate to the richer villages that have water, and then cut the sugarcane. So there was a big story about that, and then the other one was about migration from the poorer states to the cities, and then onwards to the Middle East. So this is mainly Muslims, and then there was another migration from Bangladesh to East India, and then slowly people working their way to Delhi, which is the capital, has more jobs, and then some of them would move on to Pakistan. A lot more of them would move on to the Middle East. And in the Middle East, they were, deeply exploited by very exploitative working conditions. They were recruited by labor contractors who were unscrupulous, who made false promises, and then they find a refuge like in Saudi Arabia. The most surprising thing is that the state is very powerful at enforcing laws against people working without work permits, and so what these people did is, and this of course is Muslims only, is that, and this was part of my research, was that they would migrate to one place within Saudi Arabia, which was a sanctuary for undocumented labor. And guess what? That was Mecca. So I found that within Mecca, there were lots and lots of undocumented immigrants working there, because the Saudi state decided not to take enforcement actions within the holy city. So a lot of this is discovery, and then it also shaped my being about, it's not just about activism, but about discovering the world, about exploring and learning new things, and in particular learning about things that most people don't know about. And that is one thing that drove me. I immediately jumped at the opportunity when I had the opportunity in, I think it was 2018, to go to North Korea, because I didn't know anyone who had been to North Korea, and we are told certain things about it, that it is desperately poor, and it is totalitarian. Right? That is true. But what I saw in North Korea was in fact at least visually, there was a total absence of poverty, and the housing. One of the great discoveries of going to North Korea is the housing situation, because North Korea is the only country in the world where all housing is owned by the state, and the state, rents housing to the residents for free. So nobody pays any rent, and I mean, of course, the whole economy is then restructured around that, the fact that people don't have to pay rent. It doesn't mean that because they don't have rent, then they have lots of money for other things. The cost of living and everything is structured around an economy that is structurally very different from ours. But it means that the housing is remarkably consistent. And if you go into the most remarkable thing is if you go into the villages, if I go into a village in Vietnam, in the old days, you would see a lot of small houses, small huts, and you go into a village in India and you see, houses with mud. I lived in a house for 6 months that had mud walls and a mud floor, and every house was different because it's, each house is individually built by the different owners. I mean, maybe they got some help from their neighbors. I mean, there is cooperation, unlike here, but there is a sort of what you expect in rural housing. It's not great. And it's built out of a lot of irregular materials. In North Korea, if you go to a village, what you'll see is what looks like a housing tract. You see a bunch of houses; they're all built the same, and they are not any different from houses in the suburbs of a city, because they are built by the state. And when the state builds one house, they build many houses, and they use the same floor plan. So it looks like a housing tract in Germany, So that was a big surprise but this is what I do anyway. I'm fascinated to discover things that nobody can tell me about, and I go and discover a reality that is so different from what we are told. And that also, of course, motivates re-motivates my activism to tell the story. And then when we have policies that attempt to marginalize or isolate countries, because the U.S. government does not like their government, I have something to tell. I have some, firsthand experience to say about these situations, and that is also why I made several trips to Xinjiang in China. I wanted to find the truth, and I found that, I thought that, well, if there's all this repression, it'll be very difficult to move around. There will be, I mean, there is surveillance, but what I found to my surprise was that there was an enormous amount of tourism in Xinjiang, and so it's not a closed zone. It's open to tourism, although a lot of those tourists are from either from Central Asia, or they're from China itself. There are not too many. There are very few people coming in from the West or from outside of the region. But that was something to be discovered. I could only see that by actually going there. And there's a lot to tell about, but in terms of other activism. Well, I mean, yeah, it's the biggest frustration is that we are seeming to have to fight the same struggles over and over again. But I will tell you, I want to tell you about some success stories. So the first one, if we go back to those anti-Vietnam War protests, right? And I remember um, there were some that were, like 200,000 in Market Street in San Francisco, and so they were, much bigger than the anti-war protests that we're seeing right now. And but they were persistent, and the Bay Area was a leader in those anti-war protests. And if you think back at that time, what were the military facilities in the Bay Area? Right, there was Moffett Field, there was Fort Ord, there was the Onizuka Air Force Base, there was the Alameda Naval Air Station, there was the Presidio, there was the Concord Naval Weapons Station. There was so there were so many of these military facilities. There was the military facilities on Treasure Island, the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard. All of these are gone. Okay, the military has pulled out of the Bay Area. I mean, the closest thing is Travis Air Force Base. That's really active. I mean, there are smaller, military depots that ship things out of here, and of course, you have the military industrial complex. You have Lockheed and such. But the military bases have been pulled out because the military said, at some point gave up and said, why do we have to deal with this? We'll just move the bases elsewhere. But that was a measure of the success of the anti-war movement in the Bay Area, and I think we should recognize that rather than saying simply that this is an endless struggle. There are successes, and we have to count those successes and move forward. So another one that is my experience with so I've been involved in many different things. It's not limited to peace, but one of them is keeping track or monitoring what the San Jose police do. And so I was doing some, not as much as others. I mean, there were other people who were leading the effort, but I joined it because I wanted to see what was going on, and particularly at night, watching the San Jose police. And it was known, for many years that during the Cinco de Mayo in San Jose, that the police would ramp up their operations very dramatically, and they would set up these police vehicles in the middle of the street, in the middle of Santa Clara Street. So they would have police cars on either side, and they would park their police cars in the median. So there's that strip in the middle which is for left turns in Santa Clara Street, like around Market, First, Second, in that area, and they would be. I did this observation in 2009, 2010, and probably started earlier than that. But I really spent more time in these 2 years watching what they were doing during the Cinco de Mayo, as well as the days that lead up to it, particularly the weekend days, and they would be stopping so many cars, and And then I wrote these up as two news articles in these 2 years, 2009, 2010, published them. And then a short while later, San Jose got a new police chief. His name was Chris Moore, and he held a community meeting just to get, introduce himself to the community. And after that meeting, I walked up to him. I handed him copies of these two articles. And I said to him, "Are you aware of what your department is doing on Cinco de Mayo?" And he said, "No, but I'll look into it." And so that next year, 2011, those checkpoints went away. Okay. And there was one police car that maybe didn't get the message and was still doing it. And then 2012, it was all gone. And so it shows that we should try every avenue. And some of those, we never know which avenue is going to work, but it's worth a try. And so this was in a way, it's a bad example because it's an example of we got a result without mass action, right? But there's a longer struggle here, right? Because a few years ago, the city council lifted reversed that old ordinance that prohibited cruising on Santa Clara Street, and it was celebrated. And then Cinco de Mayo happens this year, and the police activity is ramped up all over again. Okay, they don't have the fixed checkpoints, but they are stopping so many cars only on Cinco de Mayo. So it's back in a slightly different form. So the struggle continues. So we have victories and we have setbacks, but that's part of the struggle. So we will continue, and for me it's a struggle in all different sectors, in all different ways. Voting is also one of them, but it's not. It's important to remember, voting is not the only way. There are a lot of people who vote and then they don't do anything between elections, and we need to get them involved. We need to impress on them that they have to remain active in between elections, pressuring their elected officials to do the right thing. So I think I've spoken long enough, and I think it's thank you, and I think it'll be best to open it to questions or comments.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sharat. So I have a question about your going places and making observations. And I understand you went to Hiroshima-Nagasaki?
Yes.
Observations?
Well, first of all, the commemoration. I went to Hiroshima-Nagasaki in 2018 in August to attend the commemorations of the U.S. dropping of the atomic bombs on those two cities. And I was invited by the labor movement in Japan to attend and address their gatherings, and also to deliver an apology from the American people to the Japanese people. And I did that in both cities. And I also did a dance of peace in both cities. And but my observations are that, well, first of all, it's for Japan, no matter where people stand politically in Japan, the atomic bombings are something that is unforgivable. something that touches every Japanese person, and so what is happening now in Japan is that as a result of U.S. pressure, and also because of some rightward shifts in the government in Japan, there is a new push to remilitarize, and in that militarization agenda is talk about amending the Constitution. So this is the Constitution that the U.S. in part forced upon Japan as a condition of surrender, that Japan commit in the Constitution to certain limitations on its military. That is the reason why the Japanese armed forces have been labeled the self-defense forces. They're not called military. They're not called Department of War. They're called self-defense forces. So they have theoretically anyway a more limited mandate, and but now they're trying to reverse that, and Trump in particular is asking Japan, as he has asked NATO, to take more responsibility for their own defense and eliminate the limitations on their militaries. So things are changing, and so but I would say that the other observation is that there is a very well done and comprehensive museum on the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, and that museum tells the true story of the bomb, which is not just the human tragedy, but also the real reasons for the U.S. atomic bombing, which is things that I have to mention in my speech, and that is that the U.S. government narrative is that the bombs were dropped to end the war sooner and save mostly American lives. I mean, at best, if the question is, did the dropping of the bombs, save 210,000 American lives, trading those off against the 210,000 Japanese lives that were lost directly from those two bombings? And of course, it's something we can never know. But first of all, I think it's an invalid trade-off. But the reality is that the U.S. Dropped those bombs let me put this in context. So the bombs were dropped on the 6th and the 9th of August, 1945. In mid-June 1945, the Emperor Hirohito had transmitted a message to Joseph Stalin, because Japan had diplomatic relations with Russia, and asked Stalin to give this message to Truman. And the message was that Japan is ready to surrender, provided that the institution of the monarchy is preserved. And Truman received that message. He went ahead with the bombings anyway. So in other words, he could have stopped the war right there by simply declaring, we accept the Japanese monarchy. Japan would have surrendered. Instead, he refused to do that, went ahead with the bombing, because he wanted to keep Russia out of the war, right? Because Russia was preparing to enter the war in the Pacific. If Russia had entered the war in the Pacific before the Japanese surrender, it would have had a role in the post-war framework. Okay. Second reason was because he wanted to test the bombs on in a real life situation, the effects on urban centers and on masses of human beings. And the evidence for that is doubled by the fact that the first bomb was a uranium bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The second bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki was a plutonium bomb. And so the reason for the two bombs was to test both types of bombs. And anyway, so that is, but the museum in Hiroshima tells the real story. It tells these motivations. It doesn't say anything about ending the war sooner, and it also shows, you know, some of the duplicity of the U.S. forces in their involvement in monitoring the biological effects of the bombs. I mean, it was totally unscientific. It was totally unscientific, and all they wanted to do is, you know, see how many people died, and but that was my observation.
I appreciate that. How about other questions from other folk? Anybody got a question? Karen?
Amy, did you say you don't think that NATO is good? It stops the other countries and it stops the other countries like Germany or even Japan from having their own armies and everything. And it's always been a big, it was anyway before Trump came in and kind of dismantled it. Or it's been the way of our whole world for years.
Yeah, so NATO, you know, NATO was created in the time of the Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, between this, you know, the Cold War of these two superpowers. And when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the issue was actually raised, was actually discussed about whether NATO was still needed. I mean, Russia not only collapsed, but it split up into all these smaller states, and so you know, the Russian Federation is less than half the population of the original Soviet Union. So it was drastically weakened. And not only that, but these states such as the Baltic states and you know, Ukraine, Georgia, these all became, you know, additional buffer states. And Kazakhstan became additional buffer states. There were two things that were considered. One was that should NATO continue. And of course, the decision was yes, it should continue. The other issue that in fact it came to Reagan's desk was you know, should we, now that the Soviet Union is gone, should we invite Russia in addition to the smaller states from Western Russia or Western Soviet Union, should we invite Russia itself to join NATO? And you know, my personal opinion is that there is nothing in Russia that makes it inherently an enemy. And for there were many years, between 1991 and like 2010, when I don't think that even the U.S. security establishment was thinking of Russia as an enemy, and I really believe that the current situation where the Trump administration and also the Biden administration, so this cuts across party lines, where these administrations in particular have promoted the notion that China and Russia are enemies, and we have to defend, we have to arm against them, and by making them into enemies, we have created a new Cold War. It is something that was initiated really by the United States. In the case of NATO, the continued existence of NATO is premised on the notion that the buffer states, such as Ukraine, such as the Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, that these countries need NATO to defend them against Russian expansion. Is the notion that Russia is if you don't stop it now, it will expand through military action into these other countries, and these countries will fall like dominoes. Well, the domino theory was disproven in Vietnam, but specifically in the case of Europe, there's not a shred of evidence that Russia has any designs on conquering Europe, or even conquering just the states that broke away from the Soviet Union. And what happened in 2014 was that there was active discussion, active consideration that Ukraine should join NATO. The problem with that for Russia is that you have these regions. There were 3 regions within Ukraine that are predominantly Russian speaking. They're predominantly ethnic Russians, and Crimea in particular. Every single oblast within Crimea has a Russian-speaking majority. Okay, but the other factor, the strategic factor, is that Crimea has the naval base at Sevastopol, and the Sevastopol naval base is the only Russian naval base that is in warm water. Okay, the other ones, there's only 2 other major naval bases. One of them is in St. Petersburg, and the other one is in Vladivostok. And so it has no access to the Mediterranean without Sevastopol, and so that was an existential threat to Russia's ability to defend itself. And so they just couldn't allow it. It's as if let's say the Western states, California, Oregon, Washington, decide to split off, along with Hawaii. We split off from the U.S. and join a rival alliance, maybe BRICS. And what we would do is we would be taking with us all the naval bases on the Pacific, and the U.S. could not. It would not allow it. That's my point. So that's why I believe that NATO is obsolete. But we have created now such an animosity that it's going to be very hard now to reverse that to the pre 2014 situation, and and resume the cooperation that we had with Russia at that time. I hope we don't do the same thing to a point of irreversible, not competition, but contention with China.
So NATO is very complicated, is what I'm hearing. It's a very complicated issue, and we could probably have a whole discussion about it, but unfortunately, we're running out of time for tonight's program. So I just want to, first of all, do as virtual applause, however you do that, to Sharat for it's a very informative and interesting presentation about your work as an activist, your life as an activist, some of the various things you have done. Not all of them, not by any means. That's too long a list. That's too long a presentation for what we have here tonight. But I'm just really appreciate what you're doing.
So this is Charlie King wrote the original It's the Nukes That Must Go and Not Me for, I think, the Hanford plant in New England, but every nuke plant in the 70s had their own version of it, and I kind of updated it for our life now and our raging grannies. I protested at many of the nuke plants in the country and got arrested at some of them throughout the 70s. I've lived all my life in this country. I've known every flower and tree. I'm going to live here till I'm 90. It's the nukes that must go and not me. It's the nukes that must go and not me, my friend. The nukes that must go and not me. I'm going to live here till I'm 90. It's the nukes that must go and not me. We've swallowed enough radiation. It's time we were setting our ground. Come join in that grand occupation. We're shutting all power plants down. We're shutting all power plants down. We're shutting all power plants down. Come join in that grand occupation. We're shutting all power plants down. In Fukushima, the children have cancer. In Chernobyl, they can't till the land. Why sit home and wait for a meltdown? Come fight for your freedom and land. Come fight for your freedom and land. Come fight for your freedom and land. Why sit home and wait for a meltdown? Come fight for your freedom and land. No more fuel to poison our earth home. We're going to clean up our land. No enrichment to put into more bombs. We're stopping that cycle right now. We're stopping that cycle right now. We're stopping that cycle right now. No enrichment to put into more bombs. We're stopping that cycle right now. And Arlo Guthrie did a cover of it, which you can find on YouTube. Not mine, the Charlie's.
When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war, when Congress speaks for you and me, when Congress speaks for you and me, how I want to be in that number. When Congress speaks for you and me, when neighbors dare to share their truths, when neighbors dare to share their truths, how I want to be in that number. when neighbors dare to share their truth, when corporate rule is history, when corporate rule is history. How I want to be in that number when corporate rule is history. When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war. How I want to be in that number when we make peace instead of war. When we make peace instead of war.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to Penny and Portia and Rowan. Wonderful to have you all here. Thank you for recording this. Thank you, Sharat, for a wonderful presentation. Rowan will have it up when the timing is right for to get it done. I appreciate everyone, and let's stay alert in solidarity.